Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another UFO Man live stream number 14, featuring Tommy Highway on my right and UFO Man myself, of course. We are going to be starting a new scheduling system. We are going to be doing live streams every Tuesday and Saturday evening, somewhere between 8:30 and 9 o'clock p.m. Central Daylight Time. So check back for notifications, set your reminders so that you know that we're going to be there, so that you can have some good, informative entertainment. Okay, something I need to bring up. Tommy says, I can't talk. What's wrong with me? Tommy suggested that I should bring up the fact that we're having a merchandise giveaway. It is sponsored by a good friend of mine, and I can give his name. His name is Alessandro Gonzalez, excuse me, Alessandro Gonzalez. His real name, he goes by Alex. We are giving away shirts, mugs, posters, hoodies, everything you can think of. And we're going to do a drawing. So what we need you to do is, in every video that I post on UFO Man, there will be directions in the summary as to what you need to do to enter the drawing. You need to send your email to my email address, which is listed in the summary. When you do that, also include your size that you wear for a hoodie or a t-shirt. Also, let us know whether you want a mug or a poster if you win either or. That way we can decide what we're going to send you. Okay. Oh, it seems like we lost Tommy. Well, anyways, what we're going to do is we're going to play a small clip that will show you some of the merchandise that we have up for our drawing.
And Tim, if I may, for just a moment.
Sure.
We're also going to be giving away a copy of one of my latest books, Strange Tales from the Highway.
Okay.
And again, just go ahead and contact Tim about that. Put yourself into the drawing, and once you get selected, go ahead and provide us with your address, and I'll make sure a signed copy gets sent right to your home.
Right. That's a cool book. It has a lot of UFO tales and stories in it. Very, very good book. Okay, let's see here. I am going to get rid of this banner. Oh, wait a minute. Cancel. Get rid of the banner. Okay, now I'm going to play that little clip for you here. Share audio. Share.
I have that shirt.
Do you? Well, that's
yes,
right.
I do.
He does have that shirt.
Mm-hmm.
Oh. Okay, so that's some of the merchandise we're going to be giving away. Now, that's just a small selection. I have probably over 450 different items that you can choose from. I will post the links in future videos so that you can have access to those links and choose for yourself what you might want to win. And then when you win, we will send you a notice that you won. And you can pick out your shirt, hoodie, cup, mug, whatever the prize may be at the time. There are going to be 3 prizes. Third prize is going to be a mug or a poster. Second prize is going to be a t-shirt of your choice. And grand prize is going to be a t-shirt and a hoodie. So please enter. Sub if you haven't already. And good luck. All right. We are going to now segue over to Tommy Highway, who has the first segment this evening. And take it away, Tommy.
Hey, folks, I'd like to welcome everybody for coming back and thank you. You know, there's been a lot of talk lately about UFO interactions with the military. Specifically, we've all heard about the Tic Tac incident, and it's kind of been done to death, to be honest with you. But here's the thing. That is by no means the first time that our actual military has interacted with UFOs. In fact, there was a problem in 1953 where we lost an actual fighter jet as well as 2 crewmen, and they completely disappeared without a trace over Lake Superior. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you. And I want you to take a look at this. This is a...
Oop, that's not it.
You see this okay, Tim?
No, I'm looking for it. Yeah, I got it.
Great. Okay. So the night an Air Force jet mysteriously disappeared over Lake Superior, November 23rd of 1953. Okay, near the U.S.-Canadian border, U.S. Air Defense Command noticed a blip on the radar where it shouldn't have been. And this is, you know, you're thinking about the extreme paranoia of the Cold War, and here we are, right? So basically, this object was completely in restricted airspace, and it wasn't far from the Sioux Locks and the Great Lakes' most vital commercial gateway. So this is basically like one of the big major trading areas as far as like commercial shipping is concerned,
right?
You know, in the Great Lakes. I mean, it's one of the bigger, you know, the most heavily traveled area. Let's put it that way.
Right.
Okay. So naturally, again, this is a Cold War thing, and an F-86C Scorpion jet from Traw Air Force Base in Madison, Wisconsin, took off from nearby Kinross Air Force Base to investigate with 2 crew members on board. First Lieutenant Felix Moncla, I guess, who had clocked 811 flying hours, including 121 in a similar aircraft. And he was the one that actually took the pilot seat, while the second lieutenant, Robert Wilson, was the radar person, you know, the backseater, the person that would the communications and, you know, weapons, things like that. Okay. The men never returned from this mission. Well, followed, according to Daniel Kehoe, a former Marine Corps Navy aviator and UFO researcher who wrote about the incident in his book, in 1955 book, The Flying Saucer Conspiracy, was one of the strangest cases on record. I mean, this went through Project Blue Book and the whole deal. This is actually one of, I think, may have been one of the original cases. And there's a photo of the jet we're talking about. I mean, it's a substantially, you know, large piece of equipment, right?
Pretty big jet, yes.
Yeah, it is. I mean, back in the day, they were big, they were clunky. I mean, not that they aren't now, but I mean, look at that thing. It's a behemoth. Okay, once airborne, Lieutenant Wilson had difficulty tracking the unknown object, which kept changing course. In other words, the thing was probably going pow, 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 you know, all over the place, just like the Tic Tac, something like that. So with ground control directing the aviators over the radio, the Scorpion gave chase. The jet, traveling at 500 miles per hour, pursued the object for 30 minutes, gradually closing in. Now, on the ground, the radar operator guided the jet down from 25,000 to 7,000 feet, watching the blip chase the other across the screen. Gradually, the jet caught up to the unknown object about 70 miles off of Keweenaw Point in Upper Michigan at an altitude of 8,000 feet. So 8,000 feet is not all that high for a jet aircraft. I mean, that's pretty low, actually. So they were approximately 160 miles northeast of the Sioux Locks. So again, 160 miles away from one of the biggest waterways in the Great Lakes area. At that point, the 2 radar blips converged into one, locked together, as Kehoe would put it later. And then, according to an official accident report, the radar returned from the F-89 simply disappeared from the GCI ground-controlled interception station's radar scope. So basically what this means is they went out there to chase this thing down. They went out to try to identify what this thing was. Now, they probably weren't thinking flying saucer. They were probably thinking Soviet aircraft or something of that nature, something more terrestrial, let's say, origin. Well, what happened was once they basically found it, they basically made contact with it. Apparently it rushed to them, and the two blips on the radar merged, and then they were gone. This jet is just out of there. It's history. Okay. So the United States Air Force, the United States Coast Guard, and the Canadian Air Force conducted an extensive search and rescue effort. No wreckage or sign of the pilots was ever found. Nothing, not a trace of this aircraft. Okay. We're talking about, not this covers off the seat, nothing, none of the pilot gear, none of anything. There was nothing ever found of it. Okay. So, and, the Air Force, of course, they're questioned about this. I mean, anytime you lose a jet with two pilots, you've got families out there, things of that nature. I mean, you're going to have to answer for this, right? It's just the way it is. But the Air Force's official news release about the disappearance delivered to the Associated Press stated that the vanished jet was followed by radar until it merged with an object 70 miles off of Keweenaw Point in Upper Michigan. The statement appeared in the story in the Chicago Tribune with the heading, "Jet, two aboard, vanishes over Lake Superior." Okay. The Air Force soon retracted the statement like they did with Roswell. I mean, it's like you almost have a moment of clarity with the public relations people in the military, just like with Roswell. The first thing they do is they come out and they actually give you the truth. And then all of a sudden they retract it because they realize that, no, this is not good for our narrative of suppressing the truth of alien contact, right? So, according to a new statement, and this is the second statement, the ground control radar operator had misread the scope. Yeah, because that guy is not well trained and well seasoned and everything else. I mean, I'm sure he doesn't know what he's doing, right? Okay. And he'd misread. In fact, the F-89 had successfully completed the mission, intercepting and identifying the UFO as a Dakota, a Royal Canadian Air Force C-47 aircraft flying some 30 miles off course. Lieutenant Moncliffe, probably stricken with vertigo, crashed into the lake during the return to the base. Canadian officials refuted the account. No flights had taken place during that area of that night. Yeah, I mean, it's typical American government for you that what they'll do is they first of all, they come out and they step on themselves with trying to tell the truth. Then they have to retract that story. Now, in this case, they said a Canadian aircraft was involved. Now, don't you think that the person, whoever came up with this particular excuse or wild story, let's say, don't you think that they would have thought that the Canadians probably have logs of every aircraft they have in the sky taking off from their bases? I mean, it was too easy to just be able to go in there and look at those records up. But yet, here we go. And the government expected the American people to go for it. And by and large, they did. I mean, they really did. I mean, most people took that explanation and just ran with it. And that was the end of it. So, anybody have any thoughts on this one? Again, this isn't one that's, it's not a super widely, covered incident.
And there have been other cases where aircraft have merged with whatever was seen, a light or a craft of some kind. But because we do not have definitive proof, there's no way to discern or ascertain whether that is actual fact. Like you were suggesting earlier, there could be a possibility that the plane actually crash landed and may have sunk down into the silt of the lake.
Yeah, let's go ahead and talk about Lake Superior, or really the Great Lakes as a whole, but Lake Superior, in particular. Now, Lake Superior has got a very interesting bottom because there are places on Lake Superior that have this weird silt, and I think it's from some kind of dead algae or something like that has actually died and sank to the bottom, and it's done this over, God knows how long, I mean, eons, right? And I saw a show, a television show, I believe it was on History Channel, and it had some scuba divers, and they were way down deep in Lake Superior. And one guy, I mean, and he was like a 6 foot tall guy, he just let himself sink into this stuff, and it took him all the way up to about this part of his head before he actually hit to the, something that was more solid. So in theory, even though, yes, that jet is a fairly large aircraft, I mean, it's no jumbo jet, obviously, but it's pretty big. The fact that it could have, if it went in at the right angle, It could have, literally gone in, sank into that silt. And that silt is probably, if the plane broke up at all, probably deep enough to be able to conceal it. So that could be one of the reasons that we've never found this particular aircraft and this aircrew. Now, that's the more, let's say, terrestrial theory on this. Okay, that's probably what happened. They just crashed somehow. I don't believe that an experienced jet fighter pilot, perfect weather, is going to go down and have a vertigo problem. I just, they usually weed those people out of the program before they put them, behind the stick of a, $60 million aircraft, something like that, at least back in those days. So in my opinion on this one, I think we may be looking at a genuine UFO incident. I think the fact that they went all out to try to find this aircraft, and they went for weeks on this thing. It wasn't just they went and looked for, a week or whatever, like they normally would. They spent more time on this. And so did the Canadians. Everybody was very interested in this. And it's because of the radar data. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind. I mean, these radar operators, these guys know what they're doing, and that's why they do that job. Okay. They're very highly trained. I mean, this isn't Honolulu, in World War II. Okay. It's a totally different ball game now. And even in 53, I mean, they had like pencil radars back then, things like that. I mean, they could really lock onto something. So I have no doubt that they were chasing an unidentified object. I mean, I have no doubt that happened. And obviously we lost 2 pilots, so we know that something happened. There must have been a crash. But the fact that those two blips merged together and then disappeared, well, that's just really hard to explain, in my opinion.
Right. There was, flight, what was it? Malaysian Flight 370.
Right.
For the longest time, they had a theory that maybe that may have been, now, this is a leap of faith, but that the aircraft may have been abducted. Mm-hmm. The reason why is because they never found any wreckage until 3-4 months after searching and using every source and military and Coast Guard and different countries searching a huge area. What did they find? They found a tail, or a wing.
Yeah, it wasn't even that. It was like an aileron or a real small part of a wing. I mean, what they found from that aircraft is pretty small. You put it in a pickup truck.
Right. They couldn't even confirm it was from 370.
Right.
So what I'm saying is, where did the plane go?
It definitely disappeared, and that's a fact. And nobody knows for sure. So it's one of those mysteries that that it'll be a mystery until at some point it's found. And I only hope that it could be. I mean, at least for the closure of those families, let's find this aircraft. Now, do I believe that MH370 was a UFO encounter or something like that?
We don't know.
We don't know, but that may be stretching it on this one. I mean, because there's just no evidence.
Right.
Okay. I mean, anything, but then again, like Tim said, to his point, anything that we say about MH370 is completely speculative because we don't know.
Right.
I mean, the thing could be sitting in Cuba right now for all we know.
It's also speculative when we talk about this other plane that you were bringing up, Tommy. Even though they had the 2 blips on radar, couldn't they have been 2 planes that met head on, crashed into the ocean?
It's possible. That's certainly a possibility that there was a crash, but then you have 2 aircraft of fairly substantial size that have now been shattered and ripped into, maybe millions of pieces. And a lot of that stuff is going to float.
Okay. And they're going to find anything.
Not a trace. I mean, they're going to find, insulation. I mean, they're going to find hydraulic lines. They're going to find things that are lighter that will float on the water. Some I would think that they would find at least some form of evidence of a crash. It's not to say that it's impossible that they didn't, but
Vern Vision Truth Network in the chat says it's a big ocean. It could have swallowed New York and you would not have found it.
Well, that's a pretty good possibility, but they also have a radar track of where they were when they went down. And that's something that we didn't have with MS-370, the Korean jetliner.
Except we're not talking about the ocean. We're talking about Lake Superior, correct?
It's a significantly smaller body of water. I mean, I get his point, and he's right. It is still a huge body of water, but this time we had a pretty good radar track on this, and probably from multiple stations, I should think.
Right. And Mr. D.B. Cooper 77 says so many pilot sightings were never reported because they didn't want to jeopardize their career. I think that is still a rule of thumb.
Yeah.
I do not think that people in general want to jeopardize their career. And that doesn't only go for airline pilots. It goes for a lot of different people out in the workforce.
I would think even anybody in transportation. I mean, let's imagine you're a Greyhound bus driver, right? And those guys probably do see a lot of strange things. I mean, they're out there driving at night all the time. And Tim and I had talked about truckers once before, you know, how we would like to hear from the truckers because they're probably, catching a lot of things at night or whatever. But if you're, let's say, a truck driver or a bus driver, something like that, somebody in transportation where you're entrusted with people's lives, then, yeah, I bet those guys are thinking twice about coming forward. I mean, I'm a former government IT guy, and believe me, before I wrote my book, I really gave that it took me years of soul searching before I decided to come clean about the things that I've experienced because I was concerned about my career. And I'm not in transportation, entrusted with the lives of passengers.
Vern is saying that people think it is easy to find a plane in the ocean. Since the ocean is so big and it goes miles down, there are so many miles of unknown shoreline as well. Come on, he says. Well, going back to what I was saying, we are talking about Lake Superior. And in regards to Lake Superior, yes, there is unknown shoreline, and it does go down very, very deep. So I would say that would apply as well to Lake Superior. When you say that people scavenge and never report what or where they get, yes, I agree. They do that. That is true. Yes, well, it is like a sea, huge freshwater. Yep.
But there's kind of a really major difference between the ocean and like Lake Superior or one of the Great Lakes. And the basic difference is the underground topography of it. Because you have to understand in the Pacific Ocean, as an example, there are mountain ranges down there that dwarf anything that we have on the surface. I mean, they're way, way bigger than that. Okay. Bigger than Mount Everest and all that business. Now, the lake bottom, you don't really have that going on. You don't have the same you don't have the peaks and valleys and all that. It's a lake. That means that a glacier probably sat there and melted on it, or a bunch of them. So you don't have the mountain ranges down there. So things tend to be a little bit more flat on the bottom of, let's say a lake or a pond than they would be in the ocean, or at least at depth.
Right. The Great Lakes are like small oceans, according to Mr. D.B. Cooper, 77. You are correct, Cooper. You are correct. They are like oceans. Okay, Tommy, you said you had another story?
Yeah, the next one's another very interesting story. And it's, again, unknown objects messing with the military. Okay, let me go ahead and get this thing shared out for you folks. Bear with me a moment, please. Okay. Back on the night of October 7th, 1965. Oh, well, before I get into it, I just want to say that for those of you that are familiar with the show out there called UFO Hunters, that's on, I don't know if it still is, but it used to be on History Channel. They actually do an episode of the show called Code Red, okay? And I would love to be able to share that with you, but because of YouTube and the rules and regulations and copyright stuff and all of that, unfortunately, we're unable to. But what you need to do is go out and check out, it's the UFO Hunters episode Code Red. And it interviews the air traffic controller that was there this night that I'm about to explain, or about to talk about rather. And the guy is absolutely credible. I mean, there's something about him. I just find him absolutely credible. And I also find him credible because this is one of the rare instances where they actually have audio at the air traffic control tower, talking to pilots and talking to other military people and all that. I mean, this was a big thing. This happened and people saw it. Okay. And again, it's one of those things where the government and the military, they just kind of want to swipe it under the rug like it didn't happen. Well, it did happen. We have audio proof that it did happen. Okay. But back on the night of October 7th of 1965, an event of historic proportions, and I would say that's true, a true landmark in UFO history took place. The actual incursion over Edwards Air Force Base in the Palmdale, Lancaster area of California's Mojave Desert of a number of extraterrestrial craft. So this was a basically a squad of them, like a squadron, let's say. Okay. If this astonishing event is now finally gaining any measurable attention, it is a direct result of my efforts. I make that statement in all humility. It is simply the truth. Okay, so let's go on. Okay, during that fall night in 1965, it seems that 12 luminous UFOs came right down low and just over a secure military runway. Okay, and think about that. Edwards Air Force Base is one of the most restrictive airspaces that we have in this country. And I mean, it was back then as well. It might have even been a tad worse back then because we didn't have quite the radar scenario and quite the electronic equipment that we have today, obviously. But the entire incident was additionally documented with written reports, radar photos, and audio tapes. Those are the tapes that I mentioned. Made by Air Force personnel while they were actually seeing these objects. So when you hear the audio on that Code Red episode, you're hearing this in real time. This is something that, I mean, you can hear the inflections in their voices, you know, the emotion. I mean, this isn't fake. This is the real deal. And again, I mean, and you can tell that because even the military has documented an incident up to a degree. Okay. Obviously they didn't say flying saucers, but at least they acknowledged that something odd happened on this night. Okay, so basically, and considering that the serious military action against what they might imply as a threat, because again, 65, you got Vietnam just starting up, things of that nature. We were right smack in the basically middle of the Cold War at that point. So everything was Russians. I mean, it was like McCarthyism, right? Where we heard that before. But for my calculations, at least 40 hours of recordings were made. So a 5-hour event recording from at least 8 locations. So this went on for like 5 hours where these luminous craft were cruising all over that base and they were basically harassing it, for lack of a better term. They had scrambled the tapes in what they felt was a hopeless jumble of random pieces of conversation, utterly out of sequence and logical in progression. Let's get this a little further here. So imagine that. So you've got 12 luminous objects that are acknowledged by the military. They're acknowledged. We have the tapes of the audio tapes of the ATC, the air traffic control tower, and 8 different locations on the base talking about this. Okay, so they're definitely seeing something. Now, at the time, they didn't have, and the other thing is I found was very interesting about this is for whatever reason back in those days, and probably still does, Edwards Air Force Base actually had a designated UFO officer. Okay. So this was a guy I assume it was a man back then, a man that his job, and who knows what it could have been, but it had something to do with UFOs. So obviously the military was concerned enough about it to actually have an officer on board. Well, how the story goes on this is they wanted to scramble a jet and get up there right away and take a look at this thing. But for whatever reason, they had 2 pilots on standby, and these guys are not allowed, at least during the Cold War, are not allowed to take off unless it's an order from the president. Okay. That kind of thing. You know, in other words, like we're being attacked. So these guys are basically grounded. So they actually had to go and dig some other pilots up and get them out of their beds to get them out to take a look at this thing. Okay. And I'll let you go ahead. I don't want to spoil the story for you because, again, you should see that episode. It's called Code Red, the UFO Hunters. It's a really good one. And I mean, if you've seen anything out there that will make you a believer without actually experiencing, you know, off-world technologies, aliens, that kind of thing, I think that's probably it. It's definitely worth watching.
I will get the link from Tommy and post it in the credits of this live stream. So afterwards, if you want to link to it and watch it, we'll have the link for you. Okay, Tommy, anything else there?
Well, the other thing I wanted to talk about, and this is sort of, how can I put this? Those of you folks that have actually been coming to the streams and all that, and those of you that actually purchased my books, you know that I've actually had my own experiences. Okay, I mean, I've actually had those moments of a profound nature where I realized that we are not alone in this universe. We are not. I mean, that's just period. What I witnessed was non-terrestrial technology. And again, I mean, I wrote a book about it, and that's how strongly I feel about this. But, that being said, I'm a skeptic. I really am. So anytime that I watch a video or I hear a story or read a story or whatever about a UFO encounter, I naturally, I guess it's because of what I do for a living or whatever, but I naturally look at it with a skeptic's eye. Because, do I want to believe it's true? No. I neither want nor don't want to believe the story is true. I just want to go ahead and see if I can make sense of it and see if I can justify it within my own mind. Put it that way. But this one, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I want to agree with you first that the whole reason I became and took the step of becoming UFO man is because I had experiences that were world changing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They changed my world. Mm-hmm. And because of that, my viewpoint on life in general was completely changed.
Yep.
From what I saw, and it was up close. It wasn't like far away in the distance, a dot in the sky or something. This was close, 50 feet away, 500 feet up. And I'm telling you, they were big and they were on fire. I saw them. Okay. So yes, they changed my worldview. So go ahead, Tommy.
Yeah. And I've actually, one of the people that I had an encounter with, who I ran into years later, her life was profoundly changed as well. When you see something that's clearly not of this earth, clearly not of our species, okay, it's the kind of thing that it's a sobering truth, I guess, would be a really good way to put it. When you're in that moment, it's not like terrifying. It is, but it's like that instinct that you have when you see something that you shouldn't look at, but yet you can't look away. Something like that. And it's akin to those. But then again, you also have some of the stories out there. Again, I look at this with a skeptic's eye that are, in my opinion, somewhat ridiculous. And, everyone may not agree with what I'm about to say here, but this particular incident is the Muroc incident, the Muroc Air Base in February 20th of 1954. Now, story goes that Truman, who was the president at the time, he basically disappeared for a period of time at a very strange time. He had things scheduled, things that he had planned, and all of a sudden he goes MIA for the better part of a couple of days. I think it was almost 3, actually. Now, his excuse was that he had to go to the dentist, but in reality, what they say happened was that he went to, Muroc Air Force Base, I'm sorry, and he went there to meet with extraterrestrials, okay? An extraterrestrial civilization. Now, the name of the civilization or the civilization that they came from, that's all up in the air. There's several different names, of what kind of people they were, what the craft looked like, and all of that. But the most interesting thing about this is supposedly, and again, this is if you believe it or not, that Truman actually signed a treaty with these people, with these aliens. And there was supposed to be some sort of exchange of ideas, that sort of thing. And supposedly, again, if you believe this story, they actually sent one of their people to us to actually stay here as like their representative. Okay. The person was supposed to this alien was supposed to teach us things of that nature. And now again,
it's all up
supposedly that gave Truman or Truman gave the aliens permission, okay, to do a limited number of human abductions and experimentation. Okay. Again, I personally, I don't know if I buy this story, but as the story goes along, they agreed on a number of people that could be abducted. And it was apparently what I've heard anyway. It depends on who you hear it from.
The 1954 one?
Yeah, with Truman.
With Dwight D. Eisenhower.
I'm sorry. My bad. Eisenhower. Yeah. But yeah, so no, it was with Truman. This was Truman I'm talking about.
Oh.
Yeah. But anyway, supposedly there was a treaty signed again, and they could take so many people, as an abduction and experimentation or whatever. Well, apparently the aliens reneged on the deal, if you believe the story, and they started abducting a lot more people and animals and everything else than they had agreed upon. So there are many stories about what happened. They think that part of this, the Dulce base, that incident, where supposedly there was a underground war with the aliens or whatever. Supposedly, it even led up to that. But again,
it's all conjecture.
Yeah, it's all it could just be a fairy tale, just a story somebody told. There's no evidence,
and we don't know for sure if it's true, but the story is out there and it has persisted for decades.
Yeah, and it's never going to go away, and it's one of those things. There's not a shred of evidence other than a little bit of conjecture, and I mean a very little. But enough people believe this that people have written books about the theory behind it, and things of that nature. So, I guess sometimes truth may be in the eye of the beholder.
And sometimes truth is written between the lines.
Yes, that's true.
Truth is written in a lot of fiction books. So when you go out and you buy yourself a UFO book and it's fiction, it could be truth. Mm-hmm. So take it with an open mind and do your research. That's the best thing I could say. I learned that from my friends that are in the chat, Paranormal Underworld and Burn Vision and DB Cooper 77. You got to check your facts. And that's how you can establish credibility. Mm-hmm. Anything else, Tommy?
I think that pretty much does it for my segment here this evening. I guess like to your point, you have to, it's more, the most important thing I think for the ufology community is to take things with a grain of salt. Okay. And like Tim said, do your homework, do your research, things like that, because usually a light in the sky is just a light in the sky. Okay. Right. But to a certain part of our population that they see a light in the sky, their mind automatically goes to UFO. And there's a 99.999% chance or better that it's not actually an alien spacecraft. It's something else.
Right.
But then you get to those instances like, well, my experience is where, all doubt is removed. I mean, there is no doubt that we don't have this kind of technology. We've never had this kind of technology. And I'll tell you, it will be a very, very long time before we can even think about approaching the level of technology that I've witnessed. And then you've got Bob Lazar out there. He swears, and I tend to believe Bob Lazar that he actually worked on alien craft out there. And, again, Bob Lazar is a controversial figure. He's one of those guys that people either believe him or don't. Well, I'm on the Bob Lazar camp, to be honest. But again, you just have to take it all in, make sure that you read the contract from all four corners, okay, before you sign it. And I think that would be a real good lesson for a lot of people in ufology.
Right. Okay, the second segment this evening is going to be about a lady by the name of DEBRA KAUBLE. She was the person of interest that inspired the movie and miniseries called Intruders, The Incredible Visitation at Copley Woods. And Copley Woods is, believe it or not, in Indianapolis, Indiana. Now, I say believe it or not because that's where I was born, so that's a little odd. But yeah, it was in Indianapolis, Indiana. This UFO event occurred on June 30th, 1983. She encountered some beings and some bright lights. And I have a 20-minute narrative I want to play with some slides that will show you what she saw. And this is in her words, but my narrative. So let's see here. I got to share here. Top screen, share. Okay. All right. Why is it doing that? Okay, Vern, I don't know what I'm doing, I guess. I'm going to have to remove it. Hold on a minute. That shouldn't have happened. Okay. Okay, that's not working. Well, okay, I'm just going to tell the story. Debbie KAUBLE was 26 years old, unmarried, had 2 children, And this was on June 30th, 1983. She was engaged to be married. She was out of work and living with her mother. And her fiance was working and had his own apartment. DEBRA KAUBLE was cutting patterns out for a neighbor to make extra money. And one evening when she was about to go to her neighbors to cut out patterns, she was staring out the kitchen window and she saw what appeared to be a white light inside the pump house of at the end of her swimming pool area. And she said that she knew that she had closed the door and locked it, and that there would be no way that she could see a light. The light was almost too blue in color around the edges and very, very bright, more so than an incandescent bulb. And she said that she saw it, pointed it out to her mother, and her mother said, "Oh yeah, I've seen that before. Don't worry about it." And so she kind of blew it off and got ready to go over to cut patterns at her neighbor's house. And when she left on the side of her house, she had a side entrance. She went around the side to check that pool pump house door to see if it was still open with the light. And when she went by, the pump house door was closed and there was no light anymore. Okay. So she's on her way over to her friend's house, which is like a block away and one street behind where they live. And as she's going over there, nothing happens, of course. But when she gets to her friend's house, she thinks about calling her mother to see if her mother's okay. So she calls her mother and says, "Mother, do you want me to come home?" And the mother says, "No, I don't need you here." So the daughter, Deborah, she hangs up her phone. Within seconds, the phone rings again. She picks up the phone and it's her mom. Her mom sounds frightened and confused and demands that her daughter comes home now. Her friends overheard the conversation on the phone, and her friend's husband said, "Tell her to call the police. That's what they're paid for." DEBRA KAUBLE said, "No, I've got to go home now." So she went home with the promise that she would call her friends and let them know what happened. She went home, checked on her mom. When she got there, her mom was standing in a daze in the doorway, immobile and kind of dazed. And as she looked out the back door, she saw a basketball-sized white light. This basketball-sized white light was glowing bright white, so much so that you could barely stand to look at it, like the light of an arc welder, was what she said. It hurt her eyes to look into it. All of a sudden, as she's at the back door, this thing comes and slams into her chest, hits her smack dab right in the middle of the chest. She said she felt like she was on fire. She said, "The best explanation I could give is that it felt like someone being struck by lightning."
Wow.
I felt as if I was dead, as if I was dying. My molecules were individually vibrating. It felt that bad. I felt like I was on fire, like I was covered in acid. This is what she said.
Wow.
Okay. After that, her eyes became kind of clouded over. You know how you can see rings around lights when you have been swimming, say, in a pool with chlorine, and you come out and the lights have rings around them? She said she could see halos around the lights in her yard because it was starting to get dark. This light was gone, the one that hit her in the chest. But she was seeing halos around the lights. She also had lost 3 hours of time.
Ooh.
Because her friends had called her mom, asking her, Mom, where she had been. Because according to Deborah, she'd only been gone 15 minutes. But she had missed 3 hours of time. It completely was gone.
Wow.
She picked up a book on just a happen chance. She picked up a book in a bookstore one day after work, and it was called Missing Time by Bud Hopkins. She started to read the book, and it made her so violently ill, she had to go to the emergency room. She tried to read the book 3 times, and each time she got violently sick. So her mom told her to take the book back to the bookstore and get her money back or whatever. And Deborah said, no, I'll just hold on to it. Maybe I can use it in the future. A couple months after that happened, the last time she got ill, she remembered that at the back of the Missing Time book, there was an address for Bud Hopkins to write to him, to actually reach out and make contact. So Deborah KAUBLE wrote a letter to Bud Hopkins, hoping that he could help her figure out what was going on. It took, according to Deborah KAUBLE, it took several months before Bud Hopkins actually got back to her. But he did. And they had several meetings in Indianapolis, Indiana, as well as in New York City, where Bud was residing at the time. And according to what I understand, she underwent several mental and physical tests to judge her mental credibility and her physical health, so they could find out if it was something other than what she was dreaming or witnessing. Bud determined that what she had seen was real, that she was not showing any signs of lying, of creating any type of false stories, that the illnesses and the panic attacks were diagnosed as post-traumatic stress disorder. And to have post-traumatic stress disorder, you have to have something traumatic happen to you to cause it. It can't just occur. She started having memories without hypnosis that came flooding back. And her memories were of these, she called them bullet people. They had big heads, and they were narrow and thin toward their feet. They weren't gray. They were bluish. They weren't completely blue, but they were bluish gray. They had big wraparound black eyes, no nose, and a slit for a mouth. They didn't talk. They did it telepathically. They also supposedly didn't walk. They slid. So when she saw them move, it was like a sliding motion. And she said they slid in a group. The ship that they were in had landed in her backyard. And that bright light that she thought was the size of a basketball was actually the craft landing. Wow. And what it was the size of the pump house that had the light in it. It was 8 to 10 feet tall, about 10 to 15 feet wide, and it was in the shape of an egg. What's odd, though, is there were 6 beings that supposedly came out of this craft and actually approached DEBRA in the backyard, and then also went through her house, lifting up things and looking at them, putting them back down, and then left and slid back into the ship. And the ship turned into a light again, got really, really small, and was gone. This is the event that happened to Deborah KAUBLE. Now, she says that she's had reoccurring events happening over the last 37 years, because it happened 37 years ago in 1983. Since this is 2020, it'd be 37 years.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in those 37 years, she has had more visitations of the same beings, of the small bullet head people. She claims that at one point in her first marriage, she was told by the doctor that she was pregnant. Okay, so she went to the doctor and had all the checkups, and the doctor said, well, you're about 3 months along. She said, okay. And he said, I'm going to have you come back, and we're going to come back in 2 weeks or so, and we're going to do an ultrasound and check out the condition of your pregnancy. Okay. So in 2 weeks, she goes back. And before she gets there, she has a dream the night before the actual appointment, where she supposedly sees 2 small beings enter her bedroom. She cannot wake or rouse her husband, who is laying in bed next to her. In fact, she said she punched him so hard with her elbow that she left a massive bruise on his back.
Wow.
And he did not even rouse from sleep. Okay, this lady, Deborah KAUBLE, was approached by these beings, and she had the impression that she was no longer pregnant, that something had happened.
Wow.
And she woke up. She woke up from that state of mind. She thought she was dreaming, and she woke up. When she woke up, she found herself not in her bed next to her husband, but down the hall in her daughter's bed. And her daughter had been spending the night somewhere else. Okay, now she was realizing when she was in that bed, hey, I just had a dream that I wasn't pregnant. So she looked the same. She still showed like she was pregnant. She went to her doctor's appointment that day. The doctor did a test, and it came back that she was no longer pregnant, that it was common for people not to be pregnant anymore, that the doctor had seen cases like that on many occasions. Well, that seemed kind of odd to Deborah. And she went and spoke to her husband, and then they both went and talked to Bud Hopkins. Bud Hopkins put her in touch with a regressive hypnotherapist. That hypnotherapist regressed her to where she knew what happened. She was implanted with a fetus 3 months prior to her original pregnancy diagnosis of 3 months. And then they removed the baby. They removed the fetus from her. They took it by force. Deborah was put in touch with several groups, support groups of women that claim in the United States and elsewhere that their fetuses have been removed by some type of being or force, where they go to sleep pregnant and they wake up and they're not.
Yep, placenta and the fetus is gone.
And the fetus is gone. So this is what inspired Bud Hopkins to write the book Intruders, because that's what they really are. They're intruding into our privacy, into our private homes, into our private lives. They're not asking, they're taking what they want. So think about that. Do we have the ability to control our safety when these things can walk through walls? When these things can project themselves down through a beam of light through the top of your house, into your house? They can come and go at will. They can take your child from you when you're pregnant. If all this is actual truth, then this is a groundbreaking story. And that's why the movie Intruders did so well in the box office. And there was a mini series on it as well.
Yep.
I have posted the link for the movie Intruders, along with 34 years and counting, a testimony from DEBRA KAUBLE will be listed in the credits below this live stream when it's posted. That's pretty much all I have. It was a very traumatic situation. Oh, I do have one other thing to say. Many of the neighbors in the area where Deborah KAUBLE and her mother were living said that they saw multiple balls of bright white light floating around Copley Woods on the night of July 30th or June 30th, 1983. That in itself backs up a little bit of the story,
Sure.
Credibility to what happened.
Definitely some provenance there.
Yes. So I thought it was a very interesting story. I did a lot of research into it, and I have to say that you need to watch the movie Intruders. It'll blow your mind. It will, because the military is involved. The military, the U.S. military, and probably some military groups that are not even spoken of. And I'm sure Vern Vision Truth Network can also attest to that, as well as Occam and Heidi and DB Cooper in the chat room. So that's all I have for this evening. You got anything more, Tommy?
Just want to remind everybody to check out that product giveaway. That's good merch. We got some good stuff for you. Go ahead and follow the instructions there, and hopefully you'll win. Otherwise, I want to thank everybody for coming back out tonight, and we'll be doing this on a regular basis from now on. Thanks so much.
Try to do it on a regular basis, and we'll be bringing people on the panel as well. Perhaps we'll get Vern on here from Vern Vision Truth Network and do a interview with him, or maybe we'll get Alex or Occam, or we'll bring people on. We'll interview you, and we'll see what you know, and you can tell your stories. And let's really get the chat going so that we can get the information out.
See, that's actually the purpose of the channel. That's why we're here. We're here for you. We're here for people like yourself. We want to hear your stories. We want to hear everything you have to say and interact with us, because that's how we figure this out. I mean, we've all got a tiny piece of this big puzzle. Okay. We all have a small piece, and that's why it's so important for us to band together, to interact, and to share our stories. And we do that. Every time we do that, the closer to the truth we get.
Right. Vern says, what I think is there is an elaborate reason for our existence, and there might be several reasons, not just one. Yes, I agree.
Could be.
There could be several reasons. Yes, and Occam said the domination of our own geopolitical economic regime holds us back. Yes, they do, because it's all about control. If he or she, let's just say, he who controls the system controls us.
Yeah, the people, the subjects.
That's it. And they don't want to let go of that control, because if they do, then we have anarchy and chaos or so they think.
So they say. That's the
But
excuse they use.
I think we have free thinkers, and we'll have a better society if they let go of the reins. But anyways, I want to thank everybody in the chat for coming this evening. We had a really good live stream, and we will be back on Saturday. I see that burn. Anyways, we will be back on Saturday at 9:00 p.m. Central Daylight Time. So hope to see you there.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.